Have you ever gotten a really bad sunburn? It's painful, right? Now imagine a world where you couldn't even step outside without getting severely burned in minutes. A world where our food supply collapses, and rates of skin cancer and cataracts skyrocket. This isn't a scene from a sci-fi movie. This was the future we were hurtling towards just a few decades ago, because of a gaping hole in our planet's protective shield. The ozone layer. And the scariest part, most people had no idea how close we came to a global catastrophe. This is a story of the day the ozone layer almost collapsed, and how humanity, against all odds, managed to pull itself back from the brink. To understand this near disaster, we need to travel back in time. The year is 1974. Two chemists, Mario Molina and Sherwood Rowland, are working in their lab at the University of California, Irvine. They weren't looking for a global threat. They were just curious about where a certain group of man-made chemicals ended up. These chemicals were everywhere. They were called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs for short. You'd find them in your hairspray, your deodorant, your refrigerator, and your air conditioner. They were considered miracle chemicals, non-toxic, non-flammable, and incredibly stable. What could possibly be wrong with them? Well, that stability was the problem. Molina and Rowland discovered that because CFCs are so tough, they don't break down in the lower atmosphere. Instead, they drift upwards, slowly but surely, on a one-way trip to the stratosphere. And up there, about 15 to 30 kilometers above our heads, lies the ozone layer. Now, the ozone layer isn't some thick blanket. It's a very thin, very fragile layer of gas that does something absolutely crucial for life on Earth. It absorbs most of the sun's harmful ultraviolet B, or UVB, radiation. We taught it. We're toast. Literally. Molina and Rowland's groundbreaking research showed that once these super-stable CFCs reach the stratosphere, they are finally broken apart by the intense UV radiation. This releases chlorine atoms, and a single chlorine atom, they calculated, could act as a catalyst, destroying up to 100,000 ozone molecules before it's finally neutralized. It was a terrifying chemical chain reaction, happening invisibly, miles above our heads. They published their findings, warning the world that our everyday products were tearing a hole in our planet's sunscreen. At first, the world didn't really listen. The chemical industry, which produced millions of tons of CFCs, pushed back hard. They called the theory science fiction, a fairy tale. Some politicians and media outlets dismissed it as alarmist nonsense. For years, the debate raged on. Molina and Rowland were attacked, their credibility questioned. It was a classic case of science versus industry, with the fate of the planet hanging in the balance, but the evidence just kept mounting. Then, in 1985, everything changed. A team of British scientists working in Antarctica made a shocking discovery. For years, they'd been measuring the ozone layer above Halley Bay, and their instruments were showing incredibly low readings. So low, they initially thought their equipment was broken. After checking and rechecking, they had to face the unbelievable truth. A massive hole in the ozone layer was opening up over Antarctica each spring. It wasn't just a small depletion, it was a catastrophic loss. The ozone hole was real, and it was far worse than anyone had predicted. The image of that gaping, purple hole over the South Pole became an iconic symbol of environmental disaster. It was the smoking gun. You could no longer argue that this was a fairy tale. Suddenly, the abstract threat became terrifyingly concrete. The public was galvanized. News reports were filled with stark warnings about the dangers of UV radiation. People started boycotting aerosol sprays. The pressure on governments and corporations became immense. It was time to act. And act they did. In an unprecedented display of global cooperation, world leaders gathered in Canada. In 1987, they signed the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. This historic international treaty laid out a clear, mandatory timetable for phasing out the production and consumption of CFCs and other ozone-depleting substances. It wasn't just a vague promise, it was a legally binding agreement. Developed and developing countries, longtime political rivals, and competing industries all came together. They recognized that this was a threat that transcended borders and politics. The results were astonishing. The chemical industry, which had once fought the science, pivoted. They invested heavily in research and development, creating new, safer alternatives to CFCs, new refrigerators, new air conditioners, and new aerosol products were developed that didn't harm the ozone layer. Consumers changed their habits, and slowly, painstakingly, the planet began to heal. Scientists monitoring the atmosphere saw the levels of ozone chemicals peak in the late 1990s, and then begin a slow, steady decline. The ozone hole over Antarctica stopped getting bigger, and in recent years, we've seen the first definitive signs of healing. The hole is gradually shrinking. Projections show that if we stay on course, the ozone layer over the mid-latitudes could recover by around 2040, and the Antarctic hole could close completely by 2066. We did it. We faced a planet-altering crisis, and we fixed it. So, why is this story so important today? Because it's a blueprint for hope. It proves that we are capable of solving global environmental crises. Think about the parallels to the challenges we face now, like climate change. We have the scientific evidence. We have the technological solutions. What the ozone story teaches us is that what we truly need is the political will and global cooperation to act before it is too late. The Montreal Protocol is often cited as the single most successful international environmental agreement in history. It worked because the science was clear and undeniable. It worked because the public demanded action. It worked because industry was pushed to innovate. And most importantly, it worked because nations chose to cooperate rather than compete. They put the health of the planet above short-term economic interests. The heroes of this story are many. Scientists like Melina and Roland, who had the courage to speak truth to power. The British Antarctic Survey Team, whose diligence uncovered the hole. The diplomats and politicians who forged a historic agreement, and ordinary people around the world who changed their behavior and demanded a better future. We dodged a bullet. A really, really big one. If we had continued pumping CFCs into the atmosphere, the ozone layer would have collapsed worldwide by the middle of this century. The world we would be living in today would be a nightmare. But we changed course. We looked at the evidence, we listened to the science, and we acted together as a global community. It's a powerful reminder that when humanity works together, we can overcome even the most daunting challenges. The scar on our atmosphere is healing, and it stands as a testament to what is possible when we choose to protect our one and only home. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. See you next time.